thanks for tuning in to this online demonstration of how to prepare your bonsai, preparing your bonsai for spring. Spring's one of the four best seasons. They're all good, but spring is a lovely one because you see it when you walk down the street and the blossoms are starting to come out and you know, everything's starting to wake up and the trees go from dormancy to something which is much nicer. I love the trees when they're asleep. They're sometimes easier to look after, sometimes harder, but seeing the growth that they get in spring certainly puts a smile on your dial. It's that rejuvenation, that coming back to life that not only I think they enjoy, but we also enjoy. You know, the warmer nights, the longer days, all that sort of stuff. It's something to look forward to. So I wanted to just go through and talk about the use of the tree's resources, because there's a finite level that each of your bonsai have, and if you do the right thing now, just before they wake up, then you're going to give your tree the best chance to achieve whatever goal it is that you've set for your tree. And I think that's probably one of the most important things I want to get through tonight, is to talk about, one, determining what stage of development your tree's at, and secondly, to work out what your goal is to achieve over the next year, let's say, because they're sort of going to roll from winter dormancy through to next winter dormancy. All this stuff's going to happen in between, and you want to make sure that you're going to maximize that stuff to get whatever you want out of your tree. If you just automatically go into okay, it's spring, I need to prune mode, all right, I need to fertilize, all right, so it's summer now, I've got to shelter my tree and I've got to whatever with it, then you're not going to achieve your objectives with your trees. And that's where you'll find that you're sort of going to be on a treadmill, just doing the same thing over and over and over. And whereas other trees that you look at, you go, wow, it's changed so much in a short period of time. And I think that having that plan for what you want to do is a real key to success for you and your developing of your bonsai. So sorry, I'm just going to put something on mute. Here we go. Okay, so lack of action now. Like if you leave this tree, so this is one of the trees I'm going to work on tonight. So this is a liquid amber. So it's nice. It's sort of part way along the track, which I thought would be good for you to see what I do with a tree that's not at a refined stage, because it's easy to show refined trees on social media and everyone who's and ahs and whatever else. It's the trees that you don't get to see, I think, that are the important ones for everybody to see how someone develops their trees, you know, with a long-term goal to them. So if I left this tree now and I let spring come along and I let everything pop on this tree, and then it got really, really big and really long, and then I cut it back, I've missed one opportunity to further advance this tree to be better than what it currently is. So by pruning it right now, I can sort of knock it back to where I want the buds to grow, and then those buds will then grow into that position for me, rather than having everything sort of too long now and then continuing to get too long and too big and then being forced to cut it back later on, which is really common. That's what almost everybody does, is they prune their trees too late. They wait for spring before they'll prune, whereas I think pruning just prior to the coming out of dormancy is really important. And the timing for the pruning now is really important, in that if you did it a month ago, the tree's still got the dormancy period to get through. So you'll find that when you do make a cut on the tree, it's not going to heal itself, and that cut is going to therefore stay open, prone to, you know, fungal issues or pest and disease or whatever it is. But the tree can't heal itself. The tree's not going to heal itself until it gets into its growing mode, and its growing mode is just now, which is why you should have, if you haven't repotted your trees, you've maybe got a week left to sort of finish the repotting before we do wake up and all the trees come alive. But when you look around the trees and you see all the swollen buds and everything's starting to go green, that means the roots are starting to activate, which means the tree's then starting to process its resources and push for growth, push for roots and push for foliage growth, which means it's also going to be healing any cuts that are made, which is why now, and I mean right now, like in the next week, is a perfect time to be pruning any of your deciduous trees. So I'm going to split it apart a little bit tonight too and talk about pines differently, because they're a different beast, and also junipers. But initially I want to just focus on a lot of deciduous stuff because it's pretty common for a lot of people to go down that path. So now the easy thing to do would be to grab your branch cutters, your scissors, whatever, and just start tearing into it, because that's what you're told to do. You're told to prune your trees. Whereas I think before you touch any of this stuff, I think it's really, really important to make a decision. There's 3 categories for trees. One category is the in development stage. So you've got a tree that you're still developing something on. You might be still developing the trunk, you might still be developing branch structure, whatever it is. It's something that looks a little bit like this. So this little runt of a thing is a tiny little Japanese black pine, grown from seed about 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, something like that. It's got a sacrificed branch. There's next to nothing to it. It's been put into a bonsai pot this year for the first time. So until now, it's been grown in a plastic container. So this tree is going to be managed very differently to this tree. So this is a black pine that's well and truly down the refinement path. So you've got in development and you've got a refined tree. So if you follow the simple guideline of, okay, do this to all your trees, then this is going to be treated poorly and this one's going to be treated poorly, because they both need to be treated individually based on what their requirements are. The third classification you've got for your trees is one that's both in refinement and in development, and that's probably the vast majority of trees that you'll have in your collection. You'll find that you'll have a nice trunk on something, the apex will be starting to be developed, but the lower branches still need some work done on it, and voila, that's this. That's what this liquid amber is here for, because it shows you that it's got a nice trunk, it's a nice lump of wood, it's been in a bonsai pot now for, I don't know, I think it's about 5 years. It came out of the ground originally as a dead stump, and sorry, as just a stump with nothing growing on it. And then all of these branches that you see were grown through the development phase of the tree. So I've got my primary branches pretty much where I want them. You can see, I hope you can see it, but anyway, I'll be honest with it, there's wiring scars on this tree, because when I do wire my primary branches, my only focus is to have that primary branch stay in its place and never move again. And the only way I can guarantee that is to get scarring on the branch. This is so far from being a finished show tree that I don't mind that scarring being there, because sooner or later it's going to disappear as the bark starts to form. As you can see up here towards the apex, there's a lot more bark starting to form on the branches than what there are on these silvery ones down below. So now I've got my primary branches pretty much in place. The secondary branches have started, but that's where it stops. So now I'm at the point where I need to prune this tree accordingly to develop it even further in the ramification area. So it's not a refined tree, it's not a tree in development, it's that sort of 50-50 stage. So that's what I think you need to do for all of your trees is classify which stage they're going to be in before you do anything. You know, so a developed tree, you know, this little fella will be fed really heavily. Black pines go through a decandling process. This may have partial decandling done on it. I'm going to put a lot of energy into growing this sacrifice branch, because this sacrifice branch here is going to then cause me to thicken this trunk here. So if I'm going for growth and for thickness of trunk, it needs to extend here. So I'm going to feed the life out of this thing so it really takes off. Whereas this one here, I've got to be careful about how much I do with this tree and whether it does get decandled later on because of the strength of the needles of the tree. So there's a lot more assessment needs to go into this tree and how I handle it than what does the tree that's in development. So when I work on the trees, I'm going to start working my way through this liquid amber and start explaining the process of what I go through. All right, so when I look at this tree here, what I'm looking to do now is I'm looking for pruning back. When you prune something, if your finished silhouette is here, you always prune it back in here. So when it grows again, it comes out to the silhouette that you want. If I was to hedge prune this, which hedge pruning is just where you prune to a silhouette, it would look nice. Like I could make you guys all go, wow, look at that. Look, it looks fantastic. It's got that typical classic bonsai shape to it. But deep down, I know that when I've pruned it, the buds are going to be growing in the wrong directions for where I want future growth. And also I'm going to destroy the structure of this thing, because when I do get into the structure of it later on and have to improve what I've hedge pruned, I'm going to have to go back and undo all the things that I've done wrong. There's a few people out there that'll know this. I live and die by the saying that good structure is good bonsai. And I think that by taking a step backwards now with your pruning to improve the structure of your trees is going to pay dividends for you for years and years down the track. Don't prune it for now, prune it for what it's going to become, how good the tree is going to become in the future. And if that's always your goal on making your trees better with your pruning, I guarantee you'll have some classic masterpieces sitting on your bench in no time. All right, so I want to talk about this thick one here. Let me hold a piece of paper right behind it so you can see it. So I've got a nice thick branch up the top of the tree up here. From a silhouette point of view, that branch fits in beautifully. It provides me nice structure with my canopy when it's in summer. But it's growing vertically. Stuff that's vertical is removed, not because it's growing vertical, but because it's growing too strong. When something grows straight up, the primary objective of the tree is to get sunlight, which if you look at this tree and you look at all the outside branches, they've all been wide out and then they start to scoop up towards the edges. So all the outside of this tree is all doing that. It's all racing for sunlight. It's just trying to achieve what it's been designed to do. So we remove the vertical branches because they're going to stay too strong. So it's going to take me one step backwards because there's two branches I have to remove off the tree, but I've now got a nicer structure to my apex with this branch continuing to grow out here. I've left a bit of a stub on that cut there because it is quite a significant, it's a decent sized branch. It's maybe 10 mil across. So afterwards I'll clean it up a little bit and I'll put some cut paste on it to seal the cut. All right, so as far as the rest of these ones go, when I'm looking at these longer shoots sticking out towards the side, I'm going to look for a bud that's going to continue growing away from the tree. I'm not going to prune it where the bud's going to grow back into other branches. I don't want my branches to be growing and crossing each other like that. What I want them to do is I want them to grow out naturally in the right direction and then hopefully open up and start to ramify a little bit further down the track. A good example of that is this old Japanese maple. So you can see the branching structure on that one, how it's all up and out. There's no, it's not uniform like you'd expect from a black pine, but they've all got the branches growing in the same direction outwards from the tree with some kind of character to them. So that's my template in my head when I'm working my way through something like this. So I'll go through and I'll start pruning this back to get some of the branches facing out, the new buds, so when they grow. There's also little stubs that are left over from prunings on the branches through summer and through the growing period that I'll remove as well. I'm also looking for anything that's thick and coarse at the apex. Anything that's thick and coarse, this one's a prime example, which you may not be able to see too well, but it's very thick in comparison to these lighter branches down here. It means it's got to go. So it's that one step backwards to take about 100 steps forward when it comes to this sort of pruning. I'm hoping that that everyone is staying nice and robed up because we've got some cooler weather coming down. There's people from all around the country. I've got South Australia and New South Wales and I think up in Queensland as well. So the weather pattern is going to be different, and what I talk about with sheltering your trees and stuff like that is going to be different for different people. But the basic concepts that we're going to talk about with pruning and styling and structure for your trees doesn't tend to change no matter where you are. All right, so this doesn't need to be a long process, but it's necessary. All right, so I'll spin that around a little bit. Also looking for any branches that are emanating from a fork in the branching structure where I've already got two branches coming and there's a third or a fourth or something like that coming from that area. So I want to try and clean back the structure of the tree to make sure that my primary aim is to only ever have two things coming from any one spot on the tree. more than two, it looks a bit confusing and a bit heavy-handed. But secondly, it's also going to get thick, coarse growth in that area as all the branches come from that one area. So this is going to be a bit like watching the grass grow for you guys. I apologise, but the next phase that we're going to get into with this process that we're going to work through is wiring. So I just want to go over a refresher on wiring and why now is a good time too, because as I was talking before about with pruning the trees now being a good time, because they are they're in the healing phase when they start to grow as well. Wiring now is actually quite good, because you'll find that there's not a lot of sap flowing through the tree, so there's still flexibility in the branches. So your bends and stuff like that, you have to be careful, more so from the point that you don't want to go knocking buds off the tree as you're putting wire on there. But you can wire and maybe tear the branches a little bit, or be a little bit rough, not unduly rough, but you've got to be cautious with. I'm not saying you flog the life out of the tree, but you can put wire onto the tree and maybe bend the branch a little bit further. And if there's a tear or something like that, now's a good time, because the tree's going to heal pretty quickly as well. So it all sort of lines up as a great time to be getting into your bonsais now. Again, I'm just looking for anything that's too coarse and too thick, especially around the apex of the tree, because it's the strongest region on this tree is always the apex. So having something that's too thick and leaving it for next time is going to mean that it's only going to get thicker. So you need to stay on it, and like I said, it's that one step backwards to make sure that you can take a massive leap forward in the not too distant future. All right, so that's pretty much the upper part of the tree done, and you get a feeling now for it that the branches are shorter, and they're taking on that shape of that up and out characteristic for the apex. I like to have the apex on my mature trees to be a more rounded sort of shape to them, as opposed to a pointier shape. Pointier shape indicates a younger tree, and a rounder crown for me, and that's what this is all about, is what I think. What you guys think with your trees is completely different, but I'm just talking through my styling process that I like to have a more rounded apex on my mature trees. While they're developing, I'm not quite so fussed about it, but once they're on the path and they're close to that completion stage, and that's a big concern for how I look after them. All right, so on this branch here, for instance, I'll throw a bit of paper behind that as well. So you'll see this branch at the tip here is shooting up in almost a vertical angle. The branch is actually quite long compared to the rest of the silhouette as well. So the lower branches should obviously be the longest and work its way up, and we start to get that shape, that triangular shape for typical bonsai. Doesn't need to be that, but that's what I'm going for with this one. So this branch here could be wide, and it will be wide as part of the process, but it's still too long. So while I'm working on it now, I've got two choices. I can either leave it, wire it, then cut it back, or I can know roughly where it's going to finish, cut it back now and wire it later. So I'm just going to go through and prune it off now, even though it could be wide. All right. So also remove any dieback that you see on the tree. It's come from since summer. Often a lot of the colder weather that we can get, the frost and stuff like that, will have an impact on the trees and knock them about a little bit, especially the thinner branches on some of your trees. As your root structure improves and you work on the strength of the tree with fertilizing, you'll find that the dieback that's quite common on newly acquired trees or trees that maybe haven't been put through the same process of care as what your trees do, you know, what I recommend anyway on year. You know, they tend to suffer quite drastically, especially something like a Zelkova or something like that that's got, or a Chinese elm that's got really fine branches. They tend to get, you know, in the early years quite a significant amount of dieback, but then they'll fall into line and you get to the point where, I'm not saying you'll eliminate all dieback on your trees, but having a good root structure and having a good care regime and feeding regime and maintenance program for your trees and making them as strong as you possibly can, it certainly does help with dieback that you're going to see about now. All right, so starting to get there. All the buds on this one are just about to pop. So in another couple of days, I think. The cold weather we're about to have, there's a bit of a snap on the way in the next week. That may postpone things, but the average daylight hours per day now is starting to rapidly increase, and that's the real catalyst for the trees to wake up and get cracking again, which is nice for them, nice for me. I must admit, I do prefer the brighter days and the warmer weather. Okay, yeah, almost done. It's a hard process when you're looking at a branch. You know, for instance, this branch here that I've got in front of me has got 1 year's growth, 2 years growth, 3 years growth on it. But I'll look at it and think, you know, I can start working my way back in from the tip of the branch and trying to eliminate anything that I think is wrong about it. But sometimes you can't do much about a poorly structured branch, and you need to possibly remove almost all of it and start again. But that's the name of the game, because we want to end up with a great tree, a great bonsai. That's your ultimate aim, not for anyone else, but for yourself. You know, you want to be able to walk out and look at your trees and you know, and have it make you smile. You know, or have it make you're proud, or make you enjoy your time that you're spending with it, because you know it's especially times like now around the world. I find my time with my trees is the great foundation, and probably, you know, a very enjoyable time for me to, you know, over the weekend I repotted. I don't know how many pines I repotted. I think it was about 40 or 50, and I sat down on Sunday night and I felt like I'd broken both my wrists from repotting trees that haven't been out of their pot in the last 6 years, where it was like concrete trying to get them out and work the root ball down. But it also gave me that level of joy and satisfaction that I think only someone that works on bonsai and has worked on them for a long time gets, where you sort of get great satisfaction looking at not only what you've achieved, but knowing that there's another season about to start where it's all going to happen again. You know, the seasons seem to zip past really, really fast in bonsai. You know, you go from one repotting and next thing you know, you're at the next repotting, and it just seems to zip past. So I take great pride and great joy in spending time with my trees and making sure that, you know, if I do have to knock off a branch that's 4 or 5 years old, then it's going to make the tree a much better tree when it's another 4 or 5 years down the track. All right, so I think pretty much all in all, I do like having the trees on the turntable as well. So when I'm doing this sort of pruning or this sort of work on a tree, I do like to spin the trees around and have a look at them. It gives me perspective. When you're stuck in a static position, always looking at the same angle on the tree, it's very easy to always see the same thing and to maybe overlook a flaw in the tree. But I find that by getting on a table of some kind and spinning it around, I can quite easily see where I've let something slip past that possibly shouldn't have slipped past in the first place. Allows me to fix it before I give it the seal of approval and move it back out to the bench. Righto. With all the cuts, I like to leave a small stub as well. You know, call it approximately 5 mil or something like that, because it means that the nutrients are still going to flow to the bud that I've left as my future direction. And I'll explain that to you. So we've got this branch here. You can see the buds on it in different directions. A lot of you will know this, but I'll just cover it off one more time. So with this branch, depending on where I cut it, if the branch is growing in this direction, and this is the base of the tree, if I prune this branch here like this, that tip that's right at the end where I cut it is going to be the future direction of that branch. So this bud that's here is going to be the future direction that branch is going to grow, and it's going to take off and head over that way. If I pruned it back further to the next bud that's a little bit further down, that bud there dictates the future direction of that branch. So that's what I'm taking into consideration when I'm pruning around the tree, to make sure that future branches are going to grow away from each other. And I don't need to necessarily wire every branch on the tree, because it's going to take quite a lot of time. It also gives it a more artificial look. I like wiring heavily my primary branches, but I like to maybe not wire quite so much all the secondary and tertiary branches that I've got on the tree. So that's basically pruning on a tree that's halfway in refinement and halfway in development as well. So the next phase for this fella is to do some wiring. Now, as I said, it's a really good time to do wiring now, because you'll get the tree to heal from any scarring and stuff like that it's got. You want to also consider when you're wiring that the branches, when you wire them into position, the new growth is going to come up like this. So what we want with a deciduous tree, for instance, is for the branches to sort of come up and over and then start to come back up more naturally as well. We're not looking I'm not looking to make this into a pine or a conifer where the branches are very acutely wide at a very strong angle down. I want these branches to sort of come up and out, up and out. That's, again, my approach to it. It doesn't have to be your approach. Your trees are for you to enjoy. My trees are for me to enjoy, but that's what I do. So I'm looking to fill my silhouette and wire the branches. So I just want to run through some real basics with wiring. I like to use aluminium wire when it comes to my deciduous trees, and I'll use copper when it comes to my evergreens, the conifers, because they're a lot stronger and the aluminium wire won't hold long term. So if I want to wire, for instance, this branch here, and so at the moment I feel like it's going up a little bit too high, so I want to try and bring that branch down a little bit, and then as I get more growth in the middle, it'll fill up into the top of the pad. We do what we call a 10 centimetre test. So you take about 10 centimetres of aluminium wire, and you'll press it against the branch. If it can bend the branch by itself with the wire still maintaining a straight angle on it, then that wire is going to be thick enough to bend that branch. If I pick a wire and I take my 10 centimetres of it and I push it against the branch doesn't move, but the wire bends in my hand, then that wire is not thick enough to do the job that I need for it to do, okay? So 10 centimetre test will save you a lot of heartache and a lot of aggravation when you're wiring something and realise that it's actually not going to do what it's intended to do. When you wire, always wire away from the tree. So never wire from the tip of a branch back into the tree, wire from a junction or a point back towards the trunk of the tree, and then work your way out. So what I'm going to do is, I think this branch here is probably a little bit too vertical as well. So I'm going to wire this branch down this primary branch and come out to the tip of this branch here. So I'll start on top of this branch here. One hand securing the wire against the tree, then gently weaving my way down the branch, being very careful not to damage or knock any of the buds off. Once I get about 3 turns on that first wire, I'll leave it and I'll start working my way down to the second branch. So now I'm at the second branch. Again, you'll find that one wire goes in a clockwise direction, the other wire is going to go in an anti-clockwise direction. So you're going to get this forming of this loop. So this branch here is going to wind one way, and the other branch is going to form the other way. And that's what makes the wire bite and means that you can move one branch independently of the other, is that change in direction. All right. So now I've finished the second branch. I'll go back to the first branch and finish that one off. Be careful not to loop your wire back in on itself and make a horseshoe that's too tight that'll cut off the tip of the branch, because as the branch grows, it'll end up killing that part of the branch. I'll just wire one more pair of branches together, just to give you the example. So I'll join this branch here underneath. Turn around to this one. Again, 1, 2, I'll do about 3 turns on that one. And I'll come back to this first branch, follow the existing wire that I've got there. And then I'll split at the end, go another branch. Careful not to knock the buds, get down towards the tip. Careful not to close it off, cut the wire. Finish the first wire off. It's the same thing. It's, each sleep bonsai. You just do the same thing over and over and over with joining your wires together, and then bring it down. When you are going to bend the wire, make sure, or bend the branch, make sure that your wire is on the outside of the bend. If you're, so for instance, this is your branch, you want the bend to be where the wire is on the outside of the bend. So as it bends, it takes the load and stress. If the wire is on the inside of the bend, as you push it and there's no support on the outside, you'll end up breaking the branch. That's almost guaranteed. So just be careful when you're putting the wire on to make sure that you're going to achieve what you want with the wire too. So just bring that one down. And then I've got one smaller wire to do on a finer branch, just in that part of the tree, just there. So I'll run again. I'll daisy chain from this branch beside it out to that one as well, starting at the junction and working my way out towards the branch tip. Now I know I can go to the lighter wire. I step down to a thinner wire. Put the first wire on, follow it down 3 times. 3 times, the reason why I do it 3 times before I start the second wire is 3 turns on a branch is enough for it to have enough bite to stop slipping. What you don't want is the wire to be moving on the branches, because as it moves, it'll take off bark and buds. So 3 turns before you start the next wire means that wire is not going to move and do anything. So now I'll start the other branch, run it right down to the tip. And then finish this one off down to the tip as well. And I can position my branch. Yeah, so that's basics wiring. It allows me to sort of push the branch down where I want it. This one needs a little bit of wire. So throw one on that. I'll finish that branch and then we'll then we'll move on. So secure back to this branch here. Give it 3 turns. Turn around. Make sure you don't don't cross the wires too. Try and keep it as neat as you possibly can. I know I'm sort of flying through it, but I don't want to bog down the whole session with wiring techniques. I must admit, sometimes I do go to sleep and dream about how I'm going to connect branches with wires, which is pretty sad. But when you wire for a very long period of time, it's hard to get it out of your head. Okay, so that's basically a branch for that's in development. So what I've done is I've flattened the structure of the branch, which you'll see as it spins around. It doesn't have that up and out feel about it, but what's going to happen now is as those new shoots take off, I've got the branch going up and I've got it coming down, and then as the new shoots come out, they're going to push it up. So it's having that plan, like as I said at the start, for what you want to achieve with your tree, and then using the tree's resources to achieve that goal that you want to do with the tree. So that's wiring for a tree, as well as a quick haircut for something that's partially in refinement, partially in development. If there was going to be something I would do more with this tree, which may happen this year, is I like for my lower branches to be the thickest branches on the tree, whereas at the moment you'll see some of these ones up here are thicker than some of these ones down here. So if I want to thicken a branch, I've got to allow something to grow and extend. The longer a branch gets, the thicker the base has to be to support that structure that's grown out here. So if I keep pruning and I keep wiring this branch, what's going to happen is this little branch here is going to stay the same thickness. It'll gradually get thicker over time, but if I don't take action on this branch, it's not going to change at all. So as you look at the tree, you're going to look at it always and go, well, that's the thickest branch on the tree. Why is it up so high? As a tree grows, the thicker branches are the older branches because they're lower down as the tree started to grow up. So I've got to fix that. So how I'll do it with this one is I'll pick possibly a tip off one of these. And when it comes to pruning time in spring, I'll let this one continue and grow. I won't stop it from growing. And that will then cause this whole branch to thicken as this branch here, the sacrifice branch, gets longer. So it's okay to have, partial sacrifice branches on some branches, but not on others. You don't have to do it all around the tree. So that's that one. All right, so now you should have repotted, or I presume you will have repotted a lot of trees, and there's some trees that'll be protected, some trees that'll be sheltered away a little bit from the frost, and it's really important to talk about what happens to your trees now. Like if you look at the weather today, for instance, today was a beautiful day. It's 16 degrees, but it was sunshine. There was a bit of a breeze about it as well. But I went for a walk this afternoon about 4:30 and it was freezing. Like there's a cold blast that's coming. So what your trees want and need and get during daylight hours is going to be very different to what they're going to get at night time. We've got those massive fluctuations in temperature. 16 isn't hot, I know that, but we're getting really warm spring days, but we've still got the winter nights coming as well. So what I do with my trees, especially the ones that I've repotted, they're all at the phase where they're starting to grow. Some have got buds kicking on, some have got still got dormant buds, but some of them are starting to look a little bit like this little fella here, where you've got this beautiful new spring growth on it. And that spring growth is one, beautiful. Secondly, a relief, because it makes you suddenly realise the tree's made it through winter, and everyone breathes a bit of a sigh of relief, including me. Even though I know they're going to be okay, I still love to see that spring foliage. So this tree in itself, if I just treated this exactly the same way as what I will in another month's time, then this foliage takes the risk of being burnt by the cold. So I've got to be active. I've got to be as active as what the tree is. So during the day, during spring days, well, winter spring days as we're getting towards the cusp of spring, this tree gets put out into the sunlight. I try and give it as much exposure to the elements as I possibly can. But then as it starts to get colder, I'll walk out there and I'll move it back into a sheltered position on the bench, which might be under shade cloth, under the shelter of another tree that's maybe a bigger canopy or something, or under an eave or on a deck or something like that. Because I know if we have a frost, like they're talking about us having later in the week, that frost can do some really serious damage to these trees, to the leaves. So one, I don't want the tree to get damaged, but secondly, if there's finite resources in this tree and I allow for the tree to get damaged by frost, then the tree's got to take that step backwards, catch its breath, and then suddenly do it all again. So my goal that I want for this tree may not be achieved in the next growing season because I let it get damaged by the frost, and the frost has undone the new growth that I've suddenly got. So if it happens too many times, that's when you'll see a branch die. That's when you'll see part of the apex die. That's when you'll suddenly see part of the trunk of the bonsai will die and the bark will peel off. And it's like, it's because of exposure to the hot, it's whatever. It's more than likely it's because it's been in the wrong place at the wrong time for whatever reason. It's, it needs to be sheltered. Trees will grow like this and they'll go, yeah, go for it, go for broke, because there's longer daylight hours, there's some warmth, there's some sunshine, let's go for it. They don't know in a couple of days' time that we're going to get to, pretty cold, and potentially all this is going to be damaged and burnt off and turn black. So you just need to be really mindful that give it the best, protect it from the worst. And that's only for the next couple of weeks. An easy solution would be to say, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to put it into a sheltered spot and leave it there, because then I know it's going to be safe. But what happens to the growth, to the foliage is, at the moment, it's very soft and delicate. If you've got one of your trees that's just popped and it's got a few little leaves on it, it'll be soft. And you know what I mean? When you go out and you touch that leaf or you touch that new foliage, you'll look at it and go, well, that's really delicate. It's like it's sort of paper thin. The slightest thing can damage it. And it hasn't hardened off. Now, if you want to know what hardened off is, go to a tree at the end of spring, just before summer gets here, and feel their leaves. They've got like a waxy coating on them. They're definitely a darker color. They're not as vibrant and pretty as what these are. And they're dull. They're almost lifeless. And that's intentional, because the tree needs to protect itself from the hot temperatures that are coming by providing some kind of insulation or protection on its leaves. So if you keep your tree into a sheltered position 24/7, those leaves never get a chance of hardening off. So you'll have a problem later on. You might be okay for now, but then when suddenly we get to those warmer days and it's 30 degrees or 35 degrees and it's like an oven and it's blowing at 50 knots, then your leaves all will get cooked off, and it's got nothing to do with the roots of the tree. It's got nothing to do with your fertilizing. It's got nothing to do with your watering. It's got to do with your positioning of the tree, because it hasn't been able to go through its natural cycle of spring growth, exposure to the elements, and then hardening off and getting ready for the warmer days, which is exactly what it has to do. But we've got to be smarter when it's bonsai, because we want to maximize what we're going to get out of the trees. So we don't leave it fully exposed. We don't leave it fully protected. We shuffle it. It goes from one to the other. We make sure that we give it the best of both worlds. All right. So that's positioning for your trees. Another thing, watch out for any static objects that are close to your trees. Radiant heat and cold from say a brick wall or something like that can do a lot of damage, as well as you want to get some air movement on your trees as well. It's really, really important. Now we're getting into the growing period. You're going to have a lot of fungal spores flying around. You're going to have lots of pests and bugs zapping around the joint as well. So you want to make sure that you get them into an open position. I like mine on podiums because I know the air's going to flick around those trees and go right through them at a million miles an hour, and anything that's landed on the tree that can cause potential problems, It's gone. So don't shelter them. They're not babies. They're trees. We're keeping them in pots and just treat them like they're a proper tree. Okay. Right. So the next thing, fertilizing. Fertilizing doesn't start yet, but when it does, I'm going to go through the process of what I use for fertilizing, and then I'm going to give you the ifs and or buts about it, because it's not quite as easy as what I suppose it can be made out to be. I use tea bags. Now these things are an absolute godsend when it comes to fertilizing. You can get them at the $2 Japanese store, Daiso, or search eBay, or they're around a lot of places now. So they're about 5 centimeters by 8 centimeters or something like that. Got a little open hollow that you can fill them up. I fill them up, again, this is all in the notes. I fill them up with a rough mix of 50-50 of dynamic lifter and an organic pellet. I don't use inorganic fertilizers at all for my trees. The only time it may get used, Osmocote, is on my natives, which is all I use on my natives because they have a completely separate issue. But for the sake of this round of fertilization, I'm talking about my my non-native trees, effectively. And I'm going to put them into that category, and I'm going to have the natives in a separate category. So the tea bags, the really basic fundamental rule that I use, and if you want the safe non-strategic method for fertilizing your trees, it's 1 tea bag per tree per month during the growing season. So our growing seasons are spring, but we've also got one in autumn. So it means that you're going to use 6 bags of fertilizer, 6 tea bags of fertilizer on every tree for the next 12 months. That's a really basic, if you want to make sure that your trees are okay and that they do well, then that's the simple basic rule that you'll follow. But I just want to take you back a little bit to where we started tonight when I said you've got to put your tree into a category. Is it a tree in development? Is it a tree in refinement? Or is it a tree somewhere in between? Now, if your tree's a tree in development, you're going to fertilize it very differently. If you think about, break down the fundamentals of what fertilizer does. Fertilizer promotes growth, all right? Let's just focus on the nitrogen side of things. It creates foliage for your trees in one shape or another. Let's just make it really simple. That's what we're focusing on is growth for our trees. So if you've got a tree that you want to grow aggressively and you're not worried about internodes, you're not worried about distance between buds or between leaves or whatever it is, then by all means, feed the life out of it. With organic fertilizers, the reason why I use them is because you can very rarely overdo it with organic fertilizers. And I say very rarely. I can't list one example where I've overdone it with organic fertilizers, but I'm just giving caution to everybody that's watching. So, for instance, that little black pine that I showed you before, there might be a case that I put 3 tea bags on that per month during the growing season. So then I'm looking at 9 bags for spring and 9 bags again for autumn. So there's 18 bags of fertilizer on that one little tree, because all I'm focusing on, my only objective I've got with that tree is to develop the trunk, to thicken the trunk as much as I possibly can, which means growing that sacrifice branch as far as I possibly can. So food. I'm not worrying about needle length. I'm not worrying about branches. I'm not worrying about anything but that. So then if I flip it on its head and I want to refine, this maple, and I think that, okay, so when I offer food to this tree, it's going to create growth. It's going to create lots of growth, right? So it's going to mean that my internode, the distance between my branches, is going to grow out. And the longer something grows, the thicker it has to get to support that branch. So if I fertilize this tree 1 bag per month for the growing season, or if I did the 2 or 3 bags that I'm going to do for the black pine, then all this fine growth that you see on this tree, which is the beautiful part of this tree for me, and it's the refined part of the tree, that's all gone. That's all gone with 1 round of fertilizer, because every bud on this tree is going to absolutely shoot off and take off. And then suddenly, what do I have to do next time I come to prune it? I've got to cut it all off. So I've got to take that massive step backwards, because I blindly followed the instructions of fertilizing my trees. So you need to think about what you're trying to achieve with your trees, and then go, okay, well, what result am I going to get? If I give it a lot of food, what's going to happen? I'm going to get a lot of growth. Do I want a lot of growth? Yes or no? Well, no, I don't. So this tree, even though I know there's going to be 3 months of growing, roughly 3 months of growing for this tree, I might go, you know what? I'm not going to fertilise this tree for the first 6 weeks, because the first 6 weeks of this tree growing in spring will mean that I get all the buds to pop out, and the tree's going to use all its stored residual energy that it's got in its roots and in its trunk to cause the leaves to come out, and it's going to be shared over a lot of branches. So therefore the leaves are going to be a lot smaller because the tree's only got finite resources. If I don't put fertilizer on there, it can't make nitrogen by itself. So it's going to be taking what it's got stored to grow those leaves, and everything's going to be in proportion. Then once those leaves start to change, they start to harden off, the tree suddenly starts to go, well, you know what? I don't need to grow anymore. That's it. I'm going to stop. That's when I start putting the fertilizer on. That's when it starts taking what it needs and can start developing the strength of the tree before I get to the summer period. So your fertilising regime, the safe one is 1 bag per tree per month during the growing season. The smart way is to think about what you're trying to achieve with your tree, and then using the fertiliser as another tool that you've got in your arsenal to make sure that you can achieve what you want to achieve with it. So that's fertilising. My natives, I'll use a native Osmocote. There we go. Native Osmocote. It's fine. It's safe. Some of the Australian species, the Banksia, suffer from what they call phosphate toxicity. So they cark it pretty quick. If you just give them a bulk standard fertiliser, like you will most of your other exotic trees, then they'll die pretty quickly. And when I say quickly, I mean pretty quickly. And I can tell you that from experience, that there's a few trees that got put through the shredder because I ignorantly just followed the basic rule of feed your trees quickly, put them on there, do it, you'll get a lot of growth and your trees will look beautiful in 3 years' time. It's crap. It doesn't work that way. So understanding how fertilising is going to help you achieve your goals. Have your goals. What stage is your tree at? Then use the fertiliser as a tool that you can use to then maintain the growth or achieve your objective with the tree. All right, so next thing I want to talk about is we're at the end of repotting season, and I guarantee you there's trees that you are going to get to at the end of repotting. Now, spring's going to be here and you're going to start watering your trees and go, geez, I wish I'd repotted that tree. Okay? The water's not getting into the root ball like it should be. Maybe the growth isn't quite as aggressive as what you'd like. You know, maybe it's just not where the tree should be because you didn't repot the tree when you should have. Now, repotting's not based on number of years the tree's been in the pot. Repotting's based on when the roots start to take over the space available for the tree. So once that space starts to be removed and the roots start to become clogged, no matter how open and porous your soil mix is, you're going to struggle to get food in there because you can't get water in there, and you're going to find that those inner roots are going to suddenly start to die. And the only thing that's going to be feeding the tree is the outside ring of the pot, where the water's going to hit the edge, run down, and then cascade down the side there and go underneath. So you'll have a nice root base underneath, you'll have a nice root base around the side, and everything else in the middle, stuff. So I want to show you, when you do realise that's the case, I want to show you what you can actually do with your tree to try and help nurse it through. When I talked to you at the start, I talked about the goals that you want for your trees. When you realise that you've got a tree that you haven't repotted that you should have repotted, just put your goals up on the shelf for the next 12 months and focus on survival of the tree. Don't worry about excessive feeding. Don't worry about wiring. Don't worry about anything that's going to be stressful for that tree, because all you need to do is make sure that you can get that tree through the summer that's about to come, get through the autumn, get through the dormancy period, not suffer from dieback on the branches, so it still maintains its structure that it's got. Then when we get to the end of winter next year, repot the thing, start again. So I want to show you what we do. All right, so there's two things you can use. One is a chopstick, and one is a Phillips head screwdriver. I prefer the Phillips head screwdriver. This thing's been used so much it's actually worn the plating off the tip. I don't like these because this is what happens. You actually snap them. The root base gets so hard that you can't actually physically get it into there. Now this tree, Don't worry, it's going to be okay. But I've used this one as an example. This was repotted 12 months ago. Now that is absolutely rock solid. There's no way that that this can go another year without being repotted. Buds haven't popped on it yet, so I'm okay. I've got time to repot it. If I hadn't repotted it and I was worried about it, what you do is you just take the screwdriver and gently drive it into the soil. Don't jackhammer it. Just gently push in there. You don't want to go cracking your pot, and then just start to aerate. Take it out, push it back into another spot, and then start the aeration process. So what this is going to do is this is going to allow soil to enter the inner part of the root ball. It's not designed to do anything more than that. You'll find that even when you've done this, it's still going to be a bit of a bugger to try and water and get it through. So I'd suggest that you're going to need to almost start a routine of dunking your tree to get it through. Dunking, I mean, put it into a tub, let it soak for 20 minutes, half an hour, and then take it out. And that might be something which is going to happen on a weekly basis. I'm not saying don't ever put it into a bucket of water and leave it there. Don't put it into a tray of water and leave it there. That's not going to help it. Dunk it in there, make sure that the water gets into the inner core of the root ball, then take the thing out. So you'll find that this won't help with the roots growing, but it's definitely going to help with the water getting through that core. And really that's all you're trying to do is, as I said before, you're trying to make sure that this tree survives the harsh environment that it's going to go through and try and come out the other end in some shape or another. So I find that the aerating your roots is a really good system. The best system is just make sure you repot it when it's due to be repotted, which means checking your trees and making sure that you've got time to get them done before we start to grow. So yeah, this tree will be repotted. It's okay. It's not going to have to go through another summer. All right. So another chore that we have to do for right now is wound treatment. I'm a big one on making sure that any wounds that you've got on your trees are healed as best they possibly can. I don't like, of course there's carving and stuff like that, and if that's part of the design feature, which this one's got, this has got a nice hollow in the middle of the trunk. It's got a hollow up the back here, and I like that too. But if you've got a scar where you've removed a branch off a trunk, then it really should heal itself over. And there's things that we can do right now to help that. So this is definitely a developing Japanese maple. Not much to look at. This was a thread graft last year, so still developing that. Nice, ugly looking scars on the trunk as well. But this is the one that I wanted to show you guys, that I can use as an example because it's pretty clear what needs to happen with it. So you can see right here there was a branch removed, and the cambium has started to roll over, but the heartwood that's in underneath it is exposed. And what will happen is that inner wood will start to rot. It'll get soft. So it's important to make sure that we can get that cambium to roll over and heal up, because it's going to stop any water or anything getting into that part of the tree. I'm not looking to make the tree perfect. I don't want a perfect trunk. What I want to try and avoid any damage to the inner core of this tree by having it exposed to the elements. So a couple of things that I do. I use this. This is like a dentist pick. If I do it like that, you'll see it's got a very sharp tip on it, and the other end is a flattened tip. So this sharp tip here is used to activate, when I say activate, lightly aggravate the cambium layer that goes around the wound. What happens with the tree is it'll compartmentalise the damage, right? So it'll get to the point and go, well, roll the cambium over, that's enough. Problem solved, nothing more is going to happen. It doesn't care if the inside wood rots out of the tree. What it wants to do is it wants to flush its resources up to the growth up here so it can take off and get as much sunlight as it possibly can. So we need to ensure that we say to the tree, no, back down here. You need to put some focus on this thing again. Don't worry about this up here, focus on this here. How we do it is by activating the cambium. Now, technique's really simple. All you do, and that's why I like this little pick, is I'm not removing the cambium that's grown. All I'm doing is I'm scratching the inside layer of the cambium so it shows the green inner. So I'll just turn this around. Okay, so can you guys see that? See the inner part here that's been scratched has now gone green, so it's revealed the young cambium underneath that brown cambium that had grown. So what that does, it redirects the tree's resources to say something's still happening in that area. We need to close this wound off. So that's step one. The second step is I'll take cut paste. There's either cut paste or there's the cut putty. I like the paste for the deciduous, but you can use either. And then I'll gently cover not only the cambium that I've scratched, but also the wood underneath that's been exposed. Because what that does, it actually creates like a waterproof membrane where the water can't get into that damaged or into that exposed heartwood and let it rot any further. So it makes an environment where the cambium can continue to heal over. So that's basically what I'll do for every wound on this tree. And you can see there's been some done in the past. Here's one that was a big scale that's been almost closed over now. Here's another one. There's another one in here that needs to have some work done on it as well. There's another one up the top here where there's something cut off. The ultimate aim for this is this. So if you can see this big scar here, this was an enormous scar on this little Japanese maple. And by doing that aggravation of the cambium process, I do it during spring and during autumn, obviously the two growing seasons that your trees have. By repeatedly doing it, you'll find that cambium will ultimately roll over and close off. Again, not to want the tree to be perfect, but because I don't want that wood underneath to be exposed to the elements, and I don't want it to rot away and affect the structure of the tree. So that's wound. So the start of this is where we are now, which is winter. In spring, the candles will start to grow. Then I'd like to show you a real example of this, but it's probably about 3 or 4 weeks too early for being down this path. So anyone that's got a black pine, you're going to need to know this picture pretty well. So the candles start to elongate. They start to push out their little needles. Then we go through the process of candle breaking. Okay, so by breaking, I'm going to show you a picture next, which is going to explain that process to you as well. What we're doing is we're trying to distribute the resources and energy of the tree evenly. So as you get one bud that starts to grow and get really, really strong, we break it off, because then that can't grow any further. Then what happens is the resources that were going to that strong bud then get redistributed and go to the next strongest bud. That starts to grow, then we break that one off. Then the resources go to a weaker bud further down the tree. So you're finding that the tree's resources, we're telling the pine where to allocate its resources. If we didn't break this candle in spring in a few weeks' time, that candle continues to get longer and stronger, and the weaker ones stay weaker. So what we want to do is if you imagine a pair of scales, we're trying to make the weaker stronger and make the stronger weaker. And that's our process that we're going to follow for every single bonsai that you've got in your collections. We want to try and have balanced distribution of growth throughout the whole tree. So we're going to break the candles. The candles then continue to grow needles. They don't get any bigger, but they continue to grow needles. Then summer comes around. You can see where the candles have been cut off, which is decandling. If the tree is decandled, of course, new buds start to grow, because on black pines, there's dormant buds around the base of every bud that we have on the tree. They grow. We go through a process of elimination next autumn or winter, and then we start the cycle again, and we've got 2 buds where we had 1 in the past. So by going through decandling, by breaking and balancing the strength of the trees, we can suddenly distribute to get the ramification development that we want with black pines. So I'm just going to show you the other picture showing the process for spring candle breaking. Okay, so you'll see on this one, so this is about the stage that you want to look at for your black pines when you do the breaking. Okay, now every pine, every bud on every single pine that I've got all develops at different times. So this isn't something that you go, okay, on the 12th of September, I'm going to go out there and break the candles on my pine. It doesn't work that way. What you want to do is you want to look for them so they look like this, so they're just about to pop their needles out, and then you go along with your fingers, not your scissors. If you use scissors, you're going to be cutting through the needles that are hidden below where you're breaking, and you just use your finger as the picture shows, and you just twist it to the side, and it just breaks off in your fingertips. You'll see in that picture there's two candles that one's a smaller one, one's a larger one. The smaller one got left. So we're not doing this to every single candle on the tree. What we're doing is we're tackling the stronger candles first, breaking those, and then the energy as it gets distributed to the next candle and that starts to get too long again, then we break that one off. So it's a continual thing that you're going to be doing for, you know, maybe a 3 or 4 week period with your pines, and it's not a lot of work. You'll walk out there with your cup of tea in the morning and you'll break them, and then you'll go out there the next day and you'll do the same thing. So like I said, that's spring candle breaking for black pines. Junipers. I just want to quickly touch on junipers because I know bucket loads of people out there will have junipers and you'll be wondering what to do with them. Junipers rely on their foliage for their strength. So if you want your juniper to always look perfect, sooner or later it's going to cark it. It needs the new foliage growth that it's going to get in the next couple of months to make sure it's strong enough to get through this period that we've got coming. If you think about a cycle for development and working on your junipers, my approach and what I've been taught is I work on my junipers late December. I don't work on them now. And I'll just explain that to you. Here's a nice little juniper that's just been recently repotted. Now you can see on top of here, see all those little points? That's all the new growth that's about to come on this tree. So this tree is ready to pop. If I wanted this to look perfect, what would I have to remove? I'd have to remove all the new growth to get my dome perfect. Where does the tree get its strength from? From the new foliage. So it's a quandary. Do I want the tree to look perfect, or do I want the tree to live forever and be healthy? It's pretty easy. You've just got to let it be a tree for a little while. What I can do is when it gets to late December and this has grown again and got a little bit shaggier, as this grows, the roots are going to grow. So as foliage grows, root mass grows. So once this gets longer and shaggier, then I can cut this back and be very confident with the fact that I've got a stronger tree because I've got a lot more roots now because the new foliage has drawn the nutrients up and forced those roots to grow. So just let your junipers grow for the next couple of months. They may not be the prettiest looking tree on the bench, but I guarantee you they're going to be the healthiest. And junipers of all the species are really prone to a few nasty fungal diseases and stuff like that. So don't push them too hard. Just let them do what they do. Right, so we're sort of coming to the end of this now, and I was asked by a good mate of mine who's on the air now to talk about sphagnum moss. Now you'll notice on the trees around the back here and like this juniper, as I've repotted my trees, I put a layer of sphagnum on there. I reckon sphagnum is sent from the gods because it does a lot of things for the tree. It definitely protects the surface roots. I put it through a sieve, so it's really fine. It's not the thick, coarse stuff that you get at Bunnings. It's really, really fine, like powdery almost. And the layer is only millimeters thick, probably 2-3 millimeters thick at best. So it's a very light coating across the top of the tree. So it protects the surface roots that are growing. I find it's excellent as we're going into the hotter months. If you've got a tree like that maple I was showing you where I was jamming the screwdriver into the roots and I was trying to open it up, I reckon putting a layer of sphagnum moss on a tree like that too helps it retain moisture and gives it a little bit more protection from the heat. It's like an insulation layer, if you like. So I'd definitely recommend using sphagnum moss on something like that. But with my trees, when I've freshly repotted them, because they've all got sphagnum moss on there, and because I'm using that really coarse mix that most of you should know, it's, you know, this scoria pumice base mix. When you put a moisture meter in there, or when you put your finger in that mix, it feels bone dry. It's not, I guarantee you it's not, but it feels bone dry. Now, the sphagnum moss on top of the tree should be your telltale as to when you need to water your trees. So if you look at this tree here, right, you can see the sphagnum moss on top of the pot there. It's a really nice dark sort of yellow colour. Feels wet to the touch, so I'm pretty certain that this one, even though it was watered, I think it was 3 days ago, pretty sure that one doesn't need water. This one's all white. See the sphagnum's gone all white there? Now that's starting to feel really dry. That tree was watered yesterday and that was repotted about a week ago. So what's happening is, of the two trees, you can see the colour difference there on screen. So this tree started to wake up earlier than what this one has. It's getting over the shock of having been repotted, and the roots are starting to grow. So I look around at a few of the buds on the tree and I can see that the tips on the buds now are starting to push a little bit as well, which means that the roots are starting to grow. So it means this tree here needs to be watered more frequently than what this one does. So while you've got trees that are freshly repotted, put the moisture meter away, just look at the sphagnum moss. Let the sphagnum moss dictate to you when you water that tree. So as I look around here, I've got one that needs watering, I've got another one that needs watering, and I've got one over there that needs watering, and the rest of them look like they're okay. So they come into needing water at very different times, and that's where automated watering systems and that sort of thing just don't work. And I like the sphagnum moss because it's a real telltale to me to say, hey, you need to water your trees because it's starting to go. Once I start to see the sphagnum moss drying on a pretty consistent basis, and by that I mean sort of almost daily, then I'm pretty confident this tree can then move from being sheltered in my workshop and be put back out onto the benches outside in a sheltered spot. Once I start to see good growth coming, it's moved out to the exposed areas. Once the frosts are gone, it's fair game for us all. So that's what I reckon you have to do to your bonsai to prepare them as best you possibly can for spring. Spring itself's a different thing. You know, that's a whole nother kettle of fish when it comes to pinching and pruning and whatever else. But right now, I reckon that's the best course of action you can take. You know, start thinking about your plan, think about what stage your tree's at, and think about what you're going to do to achieve it through your fertilising. Don't just flood everything. Make sure that you're giving it what it needs when it needs, and look after them and enjoy yourself. It's a great time. Hopefully, this has been invigorating for you to prompt you to get out there and spend some more time with your trees. I love it. I know that everyone that's tapped in tonight certainly does as well. And it doesn't matter what stage your trees are at, they can always be better, or you can always improve them. There's always something else to do with that tree. So, you know, the day we run out of work to do on our bonsais is the day that we're in wooden boxes. So they're designed to outlast us, and I'm certain if we look after them, then they certainly will. So thank you for listening to me rant on and ramble about it. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've loved it. I truly appreciate the support from everybody, and stay in touch, look after yourselves, and take care. See ya. Thanks for joining in.